Can you imagine having your entire belief system turned upside down in an instant? That's exactly what happened to Khaled Alami, a devoted Imam who experienced something so profound, it changed the course of his life forever. As you watch this video, we challenge you to keep an open mind. Khaled's journey from the familiar teachings of Islam to a completely new understanding of spirituality will test your own beliefs and perceptions. Are you ready to question everything you thought you knew about the afterlife? Khaled Alami's life was one of unwavering devotion and spiritual leadership. As a respected Imam, he had spent decades guiding his community, his faith as solid as the foundations of the mosque where he preached. But at the age of 67, Khaled's world was shaken to its core when he received a devastating diagnosis: cancer. The news hit him like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, challenging everything he thought he knew about his place in Allah's grand design. In the days following his diagnosis, Khaled found himself grappling with a storm of emotions. How could this happen to him, a faithful servant of Allah? Had he somehow failed in his duties, or was this a test of his faith? As he lay awake at night, his mind racing with questions, Khaled turned to the one thing that had always brought him comfort: prayer. Night after night, Khaled's prayers grew more intense, more fervent. He would kneel on his prayer mat for hours, his forehead pressed to the ground, tears streaming down his face as he beseeched Allah for guidance and strength. In these moments of raw vulnerability, Khaled felt a deepening connection to his faith that he had never experienced before. It was as if the veil between the earthly and the divine had grown thin, allowing him to sense the presence of something greater than himself. As Khaled's body weakened under the onslaught of his illness, his spirit seemed to grow stronger. He found himself contemplating the mysteries of life and death with a clarity he had never known. The Quranic verses he had recited countless times took on new depths of meaning, revealing insights that had eluded him for decades. It was as if his impending mortality had sharpened his spiritual senses, allowing him to perceive truths that had always been just beyond his grasp. This phenomenon is not uncommon among those facing terminal illnesses. Many find that the prospect of death brings a renewed focus on matters of faith and spirituality. For some, like Khaled, it can lead to a strengthening of existing beliefs, while for others it may prompt a re-evaluation of long-held convictions. In Khaled's case, his illness seemed to be forging his faith into something stronger, purer, and more unshakable than ever before. As the weeks turned into months, Khaled's physical condition deteriorated, but his spiritual resolve remained unbroken. He continued to lead prayers at the mosque whenever he could, his voice weak, but his words filled with a newfound power that moved his congregation to tears. Those who knew him could sense that Khaled was on the brink of something profound, though none could have guessed the extraordinary turn his journey was about to take. It was during a routine chemotherapy session that Khaled's life took its most dramatic turn. As the drugs flowed into his veins, Khaled suddenly felt a great stillness descend upon him. The beeping of the medical equipment faded away, and he had the sensation of floating, rising above his own body. In that moment, Khaled's heart stopped, and he found himself thrust into an experience that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life, death, and the nature of reality itself. As Khaled's consciousness separated from his physical form, he was overcome with a sense of awe and disbelief. There, lying motionless on the hospital bed, was his own body. But how could this be? How could he be observing himself from above? Little did Khaled know that this was merely the beginning of a journey that would take him to the very threshold of existence and beyond. Khaled Alami found himself suspended in a surreal state of being, watching his own lifeless body from above. The scene before him was both familiar and utterly foreign. He could see the medical team rushing around his still form, their movements frantic, yet oddly distant. Khaled's mind reeled as he tried to reconcile what he was witnessing with everything he had ever known about life and death. "I was watching, my body was lifeless, but I was alive," Khaled would later recount, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. "I'm here, I wanted to shout, but no one heard me. Is this death, I thought, or am I going to meet Allah?" The conflict between his rational understanding of death and his spiritual beliefs raged within him, creating a storm of questions that seemed to have no answers. As Khaled observed the scene unfolding below, he became acutely aware of a profound shift in his perception of consciousness. How could he be aware, thinking, feeling, when his physical body lay motionless? The experience challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of existence. It was as if his consciousness had detached itself from his earthly form, floating free in a realm beyond the physical. This extraordinary phenomenon aligns with numerous scientific studies on out-of-body experiences during near-death events. Many individuals have reported similar sensations of detachment, often describing the ability to observe their own resuscitation from a vantage point above their bodies. Khaled's experience, while deeply personal, echoes a pattern that has intrigued researchers and spiritual seekers alike. As Khaled grappled with the reality of his situation, he became aware of a new presence in his field of perception. A soft, warm light began to permeate the edges of his vision, growing steadily brighter and more alluring. It seemed to call to him, promising answers to the questions that now consumed his thoughts. Khaled felt an inexplicable pull towards this radiant beacon, as if it held the key to understanding his current state of being. Just as he began to move towards the light, familiar voices drifted to him on an otherworldly breeze. "I heard lullaby my mother used to sing when I was a child, and the prayers my father would recite before the evening adhan," Khaled recalled. These sounds from his past evoked a profound sense of peace and connection, bridging the gap between his earthly life and this new, unexplored realm. The convergence of memories and emotions washed over Khaled, creating a tapestry of experiences that seemed to encapsulate his entire existence. It was as if his life was being presented to him in a single, overwhelming moment of clarity. This life review, a common theme reported by those who have had near-death experiences, served to further blur the lines between past and present, physical and spiritual. As Khaled drew closer to the mesmerizing light, he felt himself on the cusp of a great revelation. The familiar voices of his loved ones grew stronger, intertwining with the ethereal glow that now enveloped him. He stood at the threshold between two worlds, poised to step into a realm that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the afterlife. What awaited him beyond this veil of light? What truths would be revealed in the moments to come? Khaled's journey into the unknown was only just beginning, and the answers he sought lay waiting in the radiant expanse before him. As Khaled stepped into the radiant light, he found himself enveloped in a realm of unimaginable beauty. The air around him shimmered with a golden hue, and the scent of exotic flowers filled his senses. He stood in awe, gazing upon lush gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. Crystal-clear rivers flowed gently, their waters reflecting the ethereal light that seemed to emanate from every direction. The serenity that washed over Khaled was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if every worry, every pain, every earthly concern had been lifted from his shoulders. He felt lighter, purer, and more connected to the divine than he ever had during his years as an Imam. This, he thought, must be the paradise he had spent his life preaching about. As Khaled wandered through this heavenly landscape, he marveled at the intricate details that surrounded him. Trees laden with fruits he had never seen before swayed gently in a breeze that carried whispers of angelic voices. The ground beneath his feet felt soft and yielding, as if he were walking on clouds. Everything seemed to pulse with a life force that was both familiar and utterly alien. Yet, as Khaled continued to explore this seemingly perfect realm, subtle hints of disquiet began to creep into his consciousness. The light, while beautiful, seemed to shift and flicker in ways that defied natural laws. The voices he heard, though melodious, carried undercurrents of emotions he couldn't quite identify. And the fruits, upon closer inspection, appeared almost too perfect, as if they were crafted from precious gems rather than organic matter. These small inconsistencies nagged at Khaled's mind, creating a tension that stood in stark contrast to the overwhelming peace he felt. He tried to push these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the joy and wonder of his surroundings. After all, wasn't this exactly what the Quran had promised? Gardens beneath which rivers flow, a place of eternal bliss and contentment? As Khaled pondered these questions, the atmosphere around him began to change. The golden light dimmed, taking on a reddish hue that sent shivers down his spine. The gentle breeze turned cold and biting, carrying with it the faint sound of distant screams. The lush vegetation withered before his eyes, leaves curling and blackening as if touched by an unseen fire. Panic gripped Khaled's heart as he watched the paradise he had entered transform into a nightmarish landscape. The rivers of milk and honey turned to churning torrents of what looked like blood and fire. The soft ground beneath his feet hardened and cracked, revealing glimpses of a fiery abyss below. In a matter of moments, the heavenly realm Khaled thought he had entered revealed itself to be something far more sinister. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. This was not paradise. This was its opposite, a place of torment and suffering that he had never truly believed existed. As the last vestiges of beauty crumbled around him, Khaled found himself face to face with a terrifying truth. He might be in hell. As the last vestiges of the illusory paradise crumbled away, Khaled found himself plunged into an abyss of darkness, unlike anything he had ever encountered. This was not the comforting darkness of a moonless night or the peaceful blackness behind closed eyelids. No, this darkness was alive, oppressive, and all-consuming. It seemed to press in on him from all sides, a suffocating presence that threatened to crush his very being. Khaled's mind reeled as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The darkness was not just external, it seemed to seep into his thoughts, creating an endless void within his consciousness. He could no longer discern up from down, left from right. It was as if he had been cast adrift in an ocean of nothingness, with no shore in sight and no hope of rescue. As the initial shock began to subside, Khaled became aware of sounds emanating from the darkness. At first, they were faint, barely perceptible whispers that tickled the edges of his awareness. But gradually, they grew in volume and clarity, transforming into a cacophony of agonized wails and blood-curdling screams. The cries echoed around him, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Khaled's heart raced as he recognized these sounds for what they were. The lamentations of souls in torment. He had preached about the horrors of hell countless times during his years as an imam, but never had he imagined it could be like this. The reality of his situation began to sink in, and with it came a wave of existential terror. How could he, a devoted servant of Allah, find himself in such a place? As Khaled grappled with this horrifying revelation, he became aware of a familiar voice among the chorus of suffering. It was a voice he knew intimately, one that had comforted him throughout his childhood and into his adult years. With a jolt of recognition that sent ice through his veins, Khaled realized he was hearing his mother's voice, pleading for mercy amidst the torment. "I heard lullaby my mother used to sing when I was a child," Khaled would later recount, his voice choked with emotion. But this was no soothing lullaby. It was a desperate cry for help, a sound of pure anguish that shattered Khaled's heart and shook him to his very core. The realization that his beloved mother was experiencing such suffering deepened Khaled's horror beyond measure. How could this be? Had his entire understanding of the afterlife been a lie? The foundations of his faith trembled as he confronted the possibility that everything he had believed about divine justice and mercy might be wrong. As Khaled struggled to process this overwhelming revelation, he became aware of a shift in the oppressive darkness. A faint glimmer appeared in the distance, growing steadily brighter. At first, he thought it might be a sign of hope, a possibility of escape from this nightmarish realm. But as the light grew stronger, it revealed a sight that would challenge everything Khaled thought he knew about his faith and the nature of the divine. There, emerging from the darkness like a terrible apparition, was a figure seated upon a grand throne. The sight filled Khaled with a mixture of awe and dread, for he sensed that this entity held the key to understanding his current predicament. Little did he know that the revelation awaiting him would shake the very foundations of his belief system and set him on a path he could never have imagined. As the light grew stronger, Khaled's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. There, seated upon a grand throne, was a figure he instantly recognized, Prophet Muhammad. But this was not the exalted messenger of Allah that Khaled had revered his entire life. Instead, the prophet sat bound in heavy chains, his form slumped and defeated. Khaled's mind reeled, unable to comprehend the scene before him. How could this be? The Prophet Muhammad, the last and greatest of Allah's messengers, confined and shackled in what appeared to be a realm of torment? It defied everything Khaled had ever believed about the afterlife and the exalted status of the Prophet. As he struggled to make sense of this impossible sight, Khaled felt the foundations of his faith crumbling beneath him. His entire life had been built upon the teachings of Islam, with the Prophet Muhammad as the perfect example of humanity. To see him in such a state was to question everything Khaled thought he knew about divine justice and the nature of salvation. Khaled's gaze was drawn to the Prophet's face, and what he saw there shook him to his core. Muhammad's eyes, once described as shining with divine light, now brimmed with an unfathomable sorrow. It was as if the weight of centuries of human suffering had settled upon his shoulders, bowing him beneath its terrible burden. The Prophet's appearance stood in stark contrast to the Islamic teachings about his role in the afterlife. Khaled had always believed that Muhammad would intercede for the faithful on the Day of Judgment, standing as a beacon of hope and mercy. But here, chained and sorrowful, the Prophet seemed incapable of offering salvation even to himself. As Khaled grappled with this unthinkable revelation, questions flooded his mind. Why was the Prophet in this state? What could it mean for the countless millions who had placed their faith in his teachings? And if Muhammad himself was bound in this nightmarish realm, what hope could there be for ordinary believers? Unable to contain his anguish and confusion any longer, Khaled cried out to the Prophet. "Ya Rasulallah," he pleaded, using the honorific title that means Messenger of Allah. "What has happened? Why are you here, in chains? Please, tell me what this means." But his desperate pleas were met with a silence more profound than any Khaled had ever known. The Prophet's sorrowful gaze remained fixed on some distant point, as if seeing beyond the boundaries of this realm to some greater truth that Khaled could not comprehend. The silence stretched on, filled only by the distant echoes of suffering that permeated this dark place. Khaled felt himself teetering on the edge of despair, his entire worldview shattering in the face of this inexplicable scene. Just as Khaled thought he could bear no more, a new phenomenon caught his attention. From the darkness above, a familiar object began to descend. It was a book, its covers gleaming with an otherworldly light. As it fell, its pages fluttered open, revealing glimpses of text that Khaled instinctively knew held profound significance. The appearance of this mysterious tome sparked a flicker of hope in Khaled's heart. Perhaps within its pages lay the answers to the terrible questions that now plagued him. With bated breath, he watched as the book continued its descent, unaware that its revelations would challenge his understanding of faith and truth even further. As Khaled watched in awe, a familiar book materialized before him, its ornate cover gleaming with an otherworldly radiance. He recognized it immediately as the Quran, the holy text he had devoted his life to studying and teaching. But there was something different about this version, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The book hovered in midair, its pages turning of their own accord as if guided by an invisible hand. Khaled's heart raced with anticipation and fear. What revelations would this mystical tome bring? As he pondered this question, a powerful voice echoed through the darkness, seeming to emanate from the very pages of the book itself. "Khaled," it boomed, "how do you know he is the creator of all things?" The question struck him like a thunderbolt, shaking the very foundations of his faith. For the first time in his life, Khaled found himself at a loss for words. He had always accepted Allah as the supreme creator without question, but now, faced with this direct challenge, he realized he had no concrete answer. His mind scrambled to piece together a response, drawing on years of theological study, but every argument he formed seemed to crumble before it could fully take shape. As Khaled grappled with this unprecedented crisis of faith, the voice continued its relentless questioning. It probed into the origins of monotheism in Arabia, forcing Khaled to confront historical truths he had never before considered. The voice spoke of a time before Islam when Allah was viewed not as the one true God, but as one deity among many. This revelation sent shockwaves through Khaled's understanding of his religion. The pages of the Quran continued to turn, and with each new passage, Khaled felt his certainty slipping away. He had always believed in the absolute truth of the Holy Book, but now he was being forced to see it through new eyes. The voice challenged him to reconcile the teachings he had held dear with the complex tapestry of pre-Islamic beliefs that had shaped the Arabian Peninsula. As Khaled struggled to make sense of these revelations, the book before him began to change. Images rose from its pages, shimmering in the air like mirages in the desert. Khaled gasped as he saw a vision of the Kaaba, the holiest site in Islam, but it was not as he knew it. Instead of standing in solitary majesty, the sacred structure was surrounded by a multitude of idols. "Look at the idols, Khaled," the voice commanded. "Do you recognize their names? Alat, Amanat, Al-Uzza?" Khaled's mind reeled as he recalled the pre-Islamic deities, names he had only encountered in historical texts. The sight of these pagan gods surrounding the Kaaba challenged everything he thought he knew about the origins of his faith. As the images faded, Khaled was left with a profound sense of doubt. The certainties that had anchored his life now seemed to shift beneath his feet like desert sands. He found himself questioning not just the nature of Allah, but the very foundations of his beliefs. As the mystical Quran slowly closed its pages, Khaled knew that his spiritual journey had taken an unexpected and potentially life-altering turn. As the mystical Quran closed its pages, Khaled found himself transported to a scene that shook the very foundations of his faith. Before him stood the Kaaba, the holiest site in Islam, but it was not as he knew it. Instead of the sacred black cube standing in solitary majesty, it was surrounded by a multitude of idols, 360 to be exact. The sight was both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling, challenging everything Khaled thought he knew about the origins of his religion. The voice that had been guiding him through this otherworldly journey spoke again, its words echoing through the ancient scene. "Behold, Khaled," the Kaaba as it once was? Do you recognize the gods that once stood alongside Allah? Khaled's eyes darted from one idol to another, his mind struggling to reconcile this vision with his lifelong belief in Islamic monotheism. As he gazed upon the array of deities, Khaled began to recognize some of the names. Alat, the goddess of fate, stood proud and regal. Nearby, Manat, the goddess of time, held her scales of justice, and there, commanding attention, was Al-Uzza, the powerful goddess of might. These were names Khaled had encountered in historical texts, but to see them represented here as objects of worship alongside the Kaaba was almost too much to bear. The voice continued, unveiling the complex tapestry of pre-Islamic Arabian beliefs. Khaled learned that before the rise of Islam, the Arabs believed in Allah as the supreme deity, but also acknowledged other gods. This layered understanding of divinity challenged Khaled's notion of absolute monotheism, forcing him to confront the possibility that his faith had roots in a more complex spiritual landscape. As Khaled grappled with these revelations, the scene before him began to shift. The Kaaba and its surrounding idols faded, replaced by a vision of an ancient temple in Canaan. Here, people gathered to worship a god whose name sent shivers down Khaled's spine: Baal. The voice explained the linguistic and cultural connections between Baal and Allah, revealing shared Semitic roots that Khaled had never considered. The name Allah has historical connections to the Canaanite god Baal, the voice intoned, its words heavy with significance. Inscriptions found in archaeological sites show similarities between the names and worship practices. Khaled's mind reeled as he tried to process this information. Could it be that the Allah he had devoted his life to worshipping had origins in ancient polytheistic traditions? As the vision faded and Khaled found himself once again in the otherworldly darkness, he felt as though the ground beneath his feet had disappeared. Everything he thought he knew about his faith, about the nature of Allah and the origins of Islam, had been called into question. The certainties that had anchored his life now seemed as insubstantial as desert mirages. Just as Khaled thought he could bear no more, he felt a sudden, violent pull. The darkness around him began to swirl, and he had the sensation of being drawn upward at an incredible speed. In a flash of blinding light, Khaled found himself gasping for air, his eyes flying open to reveal the stark white ceiling of a hospital room. He had returned to consciousness, but the profound revelations of his otherworldly journey lingered, promising to change the course of his life forever. As Khaled's eyes fluttered open, the stark white hospital ceiling came into focus. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled his ears, a stark contrast to the otherworldly silence he had just experienced. His body felt heavy, as if weighed down by the gravity of the revelations he had witnessed. The physical world seemed somehow less real than the visions that still danced vividly in his mind. Khaled's thoughts raced, trying to make sense of what he had seen. The chained Prophet Muhammad, the mysterious book of truth, the ancient idols surrounding the Kaaba. Each image burned into his consciousness, challenging everything he had ever believed. He felt as though he were standing on the edge of a precipice, his once solid faith crumbling beneath his feet. As a nurse approached his bedside, Khaled struggled to reconcile his lifelong devotion to Islam with the profound insights he had gained during his near-death experience. The internal conflict raged within him, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of his identity. How could he continue as an imam when doubt now clouded his every thought? Studies have shown that many individuals who undergo near-death experiences report significant shifts in their understanding of faith and spirituality. Khaled's case was no exception. The confrontation with death had prompted a deep introspection, forcing him to re-evaluate beliefs he had held dear for decades. The psychological impact of his experience was profound, leaving him feeling isolated and confused. As the nurse checked his vital signs, Khaled felt an overwhelming urge to speak, to share the burden of his transformed worldview. His voice, weak and trembling, broke the silence. "Which God saved me?" he asked, the question laden with newfound doubt and uncertainty. The nurse, caught off guard by the unexpected query, struggled to formulate a response. Khaled's question reflected a broader theme observed among near-death experience survivors. Many, like him, grapple with the implications of their experiences on their understanding of divinity and religious identity. The internal conflict he faced, trying to reconcile his past religious teachings with the new insights gained during his experience, was emblematic of the profound psychological effects often reported by those who have glimpsed the threshold between life and death. As the nurse stammered a polite but non-committal answer, Khaled retreated into silence. He knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. How could he explain what he had seen to his congregation? How would his family and community react to his newfound doubts? The weight of these questions pressed down upon him, threatening to overwhelm his already fragile state. In the quiet moments that followed, Khaled found himself entering a period of intense contemplation. The familiar teachings of Islam now seemed to ring hollow in the face of his extraordinary experience. As he lay in his hospital bed, surrounded by the trappings of modern medicine, Khaled began the arduous process of reconstructing his spiritual worldview, piece by shattered piece. In the quiet solitude of his hospital room, Khaled's world had been turned upside down. The near-death experience that had shattered his faith left him adrift in a sea of uncertainty, grappling with questions he never thought he'd ask. It was in this vulnerable state that an unexpected visitor arrived, a Catholic priest making his rounds through the hospital. The priest's gentle knock on the door startled Khaled from his reverie. As the clergyman entered, Khaled felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Here was a man of faith, but of a different kind than his own. Would he judge Khaled for his doubts? Would he try to convert him in his moment of weakness? The priest, sensing Khaled's unease, approached with a warm smile and introduced himself as Father Michael. His demeanor was one of openness and compassion, immediately putting Khaled at ease. As they began to talk, Khaled found himself drawn into a conversation unlike any he had experienced before. Father Michael's approach was a masterclass in interfaith dialogue. He listened more than he spoke, his eyes filled with genuine interest as Khaled hesitantly began to share his experience. The priest didn't interrupt or try to impose his own beliefs. Instead, he created a safe space for Khaled to express his doubts and fears without judgment. As Khaled spoke of his hellish vision, the bound Prophet Muhammad, and the revelations about ancient deities, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Father Michael's non-judgmental listening acted as a balm to Khaled's troubled soul. It was a stark contrast to the fear of rejection he had anticipated from his own community. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on deep philosophical and spiritual concepts. Father Michael shared insights from his own faith tradition, not as absolute truths, but as perspectives for Khaled to consider. He spoke of the importance of personal experience in one's spiritual journey, validating Khaled's struggle to make sense of what he had witnessed. As their dialogue continued, Khaled found himself opening up more and more. The relief of sharing his burden was palpable. For the first time since his near-death experience, he felt understood and accepted, rather than judged or dismissed. It was in this moment of connection that Father Michael gently introduced the concept of Jesus, not as a replacement for Khaled's beliefs, but as another path to explore in his quest for understanding. The priest spoke of Jesus as a bridge between the human and the divine, a figure who had also grappled with profound spiritual truths. As Father Michael prepared to leave, Khaled felt a sense of anticipation he hadn't experienced since before his illness. The priest's visit had planted a seed of curiosity, opening up new avenues of spiritual exploration. Khaled knew that his journey was far from over, but for the first time since awakening in the hospital, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps in the teachings of Jesus, he might find the answers to the questions that now consumed his thoughts. As Father Michael's words gently washed over him, Khaled felt a stirring in his soul. The priest spoke of Jesus not as a distant prophet, but as a living, breathing presence, the way, the truth, and the life. For Khaled, who had spent decades viewing Jesus through the lens of Islam, this perspective was both jarring and intriguing. The internal struggle that had been simmering within Khaled since his near-death experience now reached a boiling point. On one hand, his lifelong devotion to Islam pulled at him, reminding him of the teachings he had held dear for so long. On the other, the profound revelations of his otherworldly journey had shaken the very foundations of his faith. Could it be that the answers he sought lay in a belief system he had never truly considered? As Father Michael delved deeper into the Christian understanding of Jesus, Khaled found himself drawn into a world of surprising parallels and stark differences. Both faiths revered Jesus as a significant figure, but where Islam saw him as a prophet, Christianity placed him at the very center of salvation. The priest spoke of Jesus' sacrificial love, his death on the cross, and his resurrection, concepts that challenged Khaled's understanding of divine justice and mercy. One biblical passage in particular seemed to resonate deeply with Khaled's recent experience. Father Michael quoted Jesus' words from the Gospel of John, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." These words echoed in Khaled's mind, stirring memories of his desperate search for truth in the afterlife realm. As the conversation continued, Khaled found himself captivated by the idea of a personal relationship with the divine. The concept of Jesus as both fully God and fully human offered a bridge between the earthly and the spiritual that Khaled had never encountered in his Islamic faith. It was a notion that both thrilled and terrified him, challenging everything he thought he knew about the nature of God. That night, as Khaled drifted off to sleep, his mind swirled with new ideas and possibilities. In the depths of his slumber, a vivid dream took shape. He saw a figure bathed in radiant light, reaching out to him with compassion in his eyes. The figure spoke, saying, "Go find the truth." Khaled awoke with a start, his heart racing and a profound sense of peace washing over him. The dream left an indelible mark on Khaled's soul. It felt more real, more tangible than any experience he had had in his waking life. Could this be the Jesus that Father Michael had spoken of, the one who claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life? As the first rays of dawn crept through his hospital window, Khaled made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He would explore this new path, this Christianity that offered a different perspective on the divine. His journey of spiritual discovery was far from over. In fact, it felt as though it had only just begun. Khaled's journey from devoted Imam to Christian convert was a path fraught with internal turmoil and external conflict. As he made the momentous decision to be baptized, he found himself standing at the precipice of a new life, one that would irrevocably alter his relationships and his place in the world. The days leading up to his baptism were a whirlwind of emotion for Khaled. He felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation, knowing that this step would mark a definitive break from his past. The weight of his decision pressed heavily upon him, yet he also experienced a growing sense of peace as he prepared to embrace his newfound faith. However, Khaled's choice did not come without a price. As news of his impending baptism spread, he faced vehement opposition from his family and community. The backlash was swift and harsh, with many viewing his conversion as a betrayal of their shared Islamic heritage. Khaled found himself ostracized, cut off from the very people who had once looked to him for spiritual guidance. My family, my children, my grandchildren, they all turned their backs on me, Khaled recounted, his voice heavy with emotion. I was expelled from the mosque. My community abandoned me. The rejection was a bitter pill to swallow, yet Khaled clung to his conviction that he was following a path of truth revealed to him during his near-death experience. As the day of his baptism approached, Khaled delved deeper into the symbolism and significance of this Christian rite. He learned that baptism represents a washing away of sins and a rebirth into a new life in Christ. For Khaled, who had experienced a profound spiritual awakening, this symbolism resonated deeply with his desire for transformation and renewal. The challenges faced by converts from Islam to Christianity are well documented, and Khaled's experience was no exception. He grappled with the fear of persecution, the loss of his social support system, and the daunting task of rebuilding his identity within a new faith tradition. Yet despite these obstacles, Khaled felt an unwavering pull towards his new spiritual path. As Khaled stepped into the baptismal waters, a hush fell over the small gathering of supporters who had come to witness this momentous occasion. The cool water enveloped him, and as he emerged, Khaled felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. The water poured over my head, and it felt like everything had been washed away, he later described. All the chains, the nightmares, the throne, they all flowed away with the water. In that profound moment, Khaled experienced a freedom he had never known before. The burdens of his past, the doubts that had plagued him, seemed to dissolve in the cleansing waters of baptism. As he rose from the water, Khaled felt a deep sense of peace wash over him, a feeling of coming home to a truth he had long sought. Little did Khaled know that his baptism was just the beginning of an extraordinary journey. As he stepped into his new life as a Christian convert, he was unaware of the miraculous events that awaited him. Events that would challenge the boundaries between faith and science and forever change the course of his life. In the days following Khaled's baptism, an extraordinary turn of events unfolded that would challenge the boundaries between faith and science. As Khaled underwent his routine medical checkups, his doctors were left in a state of bewilderment. The aggressive cancer that had once ravaged his body seemed to be retreating at an unprecedented rate. Scans that had previously shown a grim prognosis now revealed a dramatic reduction in tumor size, defying all medical expectations. The oncology team, led by Dr. Sarah Thompson, pored over Khaled's test results with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. They had seen cases of cancer remission before, but never one so rapid and complete. Dr. Thompson, a scientist at heart, found herself grappling with a phenomenon that seemed to defy the laws of nature she had dedicated her life to understanding. As word of Khaled's improving condition spread through the hospital, a palpable tension arose between those who sought a scientific explanation and those who saw the hand of the divine at work. Nurses whispered about miracles in the hallways, while researchers huddled in conference rooms, desperately seeking a rational explanation for Khaled's sudden turnaround. The concept of miraculous healings has long been a cornerstone of religious faith, with accounts of divine intervention spanning across cultures and centuries. From the healing miracles of Jesus in the New Testament to modern-day claims of supernatural cures, these events have captivated believers and skeptics alike. Khaled's case seemed to straddle the line between the explainable and the miraculous, challenging both the faithful and the skeptical to question their deepest held beliefs. In the realm of medical science, spontaneous remissions in cancer patients, while rare, are not unheard of. Studies have documented cases where advanced cancers have inexplicably disappeared without conventional treatment. These cases, often termed exceptional responders, have become the subject of intense scientific scrutiny. Researchers have proposed various explanations, from sudden immune system activation to genetic mutations that render cancer cells vulnerable to the body's natural defenses. As Khaled's recovery continued to progress, anticipation built among his medical team and the hospital staff. Would his case provide groundbreaking insights into cancer treatment, or would it remain an inexplicable anomaly? The question hung in the air, creating an atmosphere of suspense and wonder. For Khaled himself, there was no doubt about the source of his healing. With tears in his eyes, he attributed his recovery to his newfound faith in Jesus. "I felt truly alive after my baptism," he would later recount, his voice filled with reverence. The physical healing he experienced seemed to mirror the spiritual transformation he had undergone, a testament to the profound impact of his conversion. As Khaled prepared to leave the hospital, a new chapter of his life was beginning to unfold. His miraculous recovery had not only restored his health, but had also ignited a passion to share his extraordinary journey with others. The man who had once led prayers in a mosque now felt called to a different kind of ministry, one born from his own experience of transformation and healing. As Khaled emerged from the transformative waters of baptism, he found himself standing at the threshold of a new life. The man who had once led prayers in a mosque now gazed upon the world with eyes renewed by faith. His near-death experience, once a source of confusion and turmoil, now shimmered with newfound meaning. Khaled saw his journey not as a rejection of his past, but as a profound awakening to a greater truth. Yet the path ahead was far from smooth. Khaled's conversion had sent shockwaves through his former community. The very people who once looked to him for guidance now regarded him with a mix of betrayal and bewilderment. "I am no longer an imam," Khaled reflected, his voice tinged with both sadness and resolve. "My family, my children, my grandchildren, they all turned their backs on me." The weight of this rejection was heavy, but Khaled found strength in his newfound faith. As Khaled grappled with the loss of his former life, he discovered a wellspring of support from unexpected sources. Networks of former Muslims who had converted to Christianity reached out, offering guidance and fellowship. These individuals who had walked a similar path provided Khaled with a sense of belonging and understanding that he had feared lost forever. Their stories of perseverance in the face of adversity bolstered Khaled's spirit, reminding him that he was not alone in his journey. With each passing day, Khaled's understanding of his near-death experience deepened. The terrifying visions of hell and the bound Prophet Muhammad now took on new significance. Rather than signs of divine punishment, Khaled came to see them as wake-up calls, guiding him towards a more profound truth. The miraculous healing that followed his baptism only served to reinforce his belief in the transformative power of his new faith. As Khaled's physical and spiritual healing progressed, he felt a growing urgency to share his story. The man who had once preached in a mosque now found himself speaking to diverse audiences, recounting his extraordinary journey from Islam to Christianity. His words, infused with the passion of personal experience, touched hearts and sparked curiosity in ways he had never imagined possible. "I knew who had healed me," Khaled would often say, his eyes glimmering with conviction. His testimony of miraculous healing and spiritual transformation resonated deeply with those grappling with their own questions of faith and existence. Khaled's journey became a beacon of hope for others seeking answers beyond the boundaries of their inherited beliefs. As Khaled embraced his new role as a bridge between two faiths, he found an unexpected sense of peace and fulfillment. The challenges he faced, rather than diminishing his spirit, only served to strengthen his resolve. With each person touched by his story, Khaled felt he was fulfilling a greater purpose, one that transcended the confines of any single religious tradition. His life had become a living testament to the power of faith, healing, and the endless possibilities of spiritual awakening. Khaled Alami's journey from devoted Imam to Christian convert is a testament to the transformative power of personal spiritual experiences. His near-death encounter shattered the foundations of his lifelong beliefs, propelling him into a profound quest for truth. The visions he witnessed in the afterlife realm, from the bound Prophet Muhammad to the revelations about ancient deities, challenged everything he thought he knew about his faith. As Khaled emerged from the waters of baptism, he felt a sense of rebirth that transcended the physical. His miraculous healing from cancer only served to reinforce his newfound faith, leaving doctors baffled and believers in awe. The words of Jesus, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," resonated deeply with Khaled, offering a new perspective on his spiritual journey. Khaled's story serves as a powerful reminder that our beliefs are not set in stone. It encourages us to approach matters of faith with an open mind and a seeking heart. Perhaps, in the depths of our own spiritual experiences, we too might find unexpected truths that challenge and transform us, just as Khaled did in his extraordinary journey from Islam to Christianity.